What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. And well, as you all know, it is Wednesday, which means the new summit is now live here on the game, which also means we are now 2 weeks away from Motorfest, which is honestly insane. But for this week, guys, we have the United States East Speed Tour Summit, and in Platinum, we have the USST band tire, which I would say is actually a pretty cool looking tire. But at the same time, though, I do feel like a lot of players are most likely going after these vanity items, at least for Motorfest. And then in gold, we have the legendary half set boosted for the Rallycross cars, and I would probably say having pure and or drifty on a Nitro Chemist set is by far going to be one of the best possible combos you could have, and having drifty on a Rallycross car is definitely going to be a great option. But moving over to the next summit, guys, Hypercars Glory, we actually have the Proto Lucky One Marble Edition, and to be honest, when seeing this car, I was actually insanely confused, only because the actual Proto Lucky One's insanely underrated. It's also going to be a very old Motor Pass car, so seeing this thing actually make a return is honestly pretty awesome. And then moving over to gold, though, is going to be some free parts for the McLaren Senna. I really do think it's actually going to be worth it, considering most of the hypercar parts can honestly get pretty expensive, like being like 15 to 20,000 per piece, so having some free parts for that vehicle is by far going to be a nice touch. And then in silver, we have the blinking white lines, which is not that cool for that matter. But looking at this summit, though, I am looking forward to this one, guys. So obviously 2 hypercar events here, and then of course on the bottom you also get to drive the Marble Edition as well, which is always going to be a great thing, especially because you actually get to drive the cars in the summit. So I'm sure a lot of players may end up judging that said vehicle in one of these summits. But moving over to the next event is going to be a no restriction drag race. And then finally, guys, for this summit's mixed event, you will have to use a touring car in one of the hypercar events. I really wonder if that's actually going to be New York. Could you guys imagine? That would be a crazy send-off until Motorfest. But on top, we also have an Escape, a Slalom, and or a Speed Trap over here. So it looks like the summits are going to be action-packed right up until Motorfest. And then moving over to the summit here, starting off with the first skill is going to be an Escape. So for this, guys, you obviously have to use a boat. And for me, I actually ran the 1414 Demon, which I would probably say to this day is by far going to legit be one of the best boats you can possibly use. And I'm sure you're most likely going to notice only this boat being used on the Escape, so I would definitely recommend picking that boat up for those. And then moving over to the Slalom this week, I actually decided to run a different car, which I would say is by far not going to be the best option. But even running a drift car, guys, I still got almost 150,000 points. I figured why not run something different to really mix up these slaloms. Of course, this is by far not going to be the best vehicle, but I really do find it insanely fun to actually mix this up and to really use different vehicles for that matter. But moving over to the last skill here is going to be an Escape, and for this one I actually decided to run the Chevrolet Corvette Stingray, which I would probably say is actually not the best option. From what I did see, a lot of people are running Alpha GP cars, which I would probably say is by far the best way. But if you guys do want to have a funny challenge, I would recommend trying out a drag car. It's going to be insanely annoying trying to dodge the AI on this one, which obviously using a drag car you can't turn. But moving over to the first event, you will be able to use the 911 Carrera RSR Turbo. I also found this event to be insanely fun, so a lot of the events in this summit are going to be some type of US Speed Tour event, so expect a lot of these races to be on the longer side. I did notice many of them are well over like 3 to 5 minutes, which I would say driving a car like the 911 Carrera RSR is luckily going to make them a lot of fun. So for this, guys, you basically go as fast as you can. Now I would slightly be careful on some of the turns though, because this car is indeed a 5-speed, and if you guys are running manual, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare. And we all know by now how some of these cars really do shift, and or how they can actually be kind of frustrating if you are in manual. Luckily the Carrera RSR is actually not as bad as I thought, and I did notice around many corners you can also hold that thing in 4th gear, which luckily is going to push you to be a bit faster. But moving over to the next event though is going to be a Rallycross event, and for this one, guys, it's once again going to be stage 5. For me, I actually decided to run the Ford Fiesta. Now, this car is obviously not going to be like the fastest car in this class though, but in some ways it's actually going to be one of the fastest top speed vehicles in the Rallycross category. It does around 193 miles an hour, so at least it does have that going for it. But if you are looking for like one of the best handling cars, you're most likely going to want the Escalade and or the lovely WRC05. But moving over to the next event here is going to be an Alpha GP race. And for this one, you actually get to use one of my favorite new cars in the Crew 2, which is going to be the Proto Concept Pulse Performance. Now, one of my favorite things about this car, guys, is yes, it does handle insanely well. It also does 319 miles an hour, which does make it insanely fun. If you were wondering, though, is this car going to be overpowered? If a lot of you guys have not driven this car yet, I would most likely say this event is probably going to seal this. And the main reason for that is the top speed's like 270, and you have to go through a lot of nitrous to actually get this car to 320, so that's by far going to be a great way to balance it. And then moving over to the only street race in this entire summit is going to be the US Speed Tour Special here, which is going to be Harlem. For me, guys, I actually decided to use the Porsche 911 Carrera 4S, and I'm sure looking at the leaderboards here, you're most likely going to see a trend of what car you most likely see the most, but I did want to use the Porsche 911 Carrera because this thing's insanely fun to use. Sure, it's going to be an 8-speed, so you will have to shift it a lot more often if you are in manual. It is such a blast to use on these events though because it handles great, and it's also going to be a very reliable car for that matter when it comes to overall speed, and luckily it's not going to be insanely annoying to use like some of the other ones. But moving over to the next event is going to be a rally raid event. And for this event, I actually decided to run the Ram 1500 Rebel, which to this day is by far one of my favorite rally raid vehicles in the Crew 2. I have to admit one thing, guys, yes, this truck handles great. For an event like this, though, it's by far not going to be the greatest option, and the main reason for that is going to come down to its top speed being low. It actually only does like 165 miles an hour, compared to something like the lovely Raptor Evo 1 and or the Volkswagen Beetle hitting around 180 or so. So yeah, this truck is definitely not going to be the fastest, but my goodness, it really does hold its own in an event like this. Even though this thing doesn't do 180, guys, you can still get a great time. I got around 3 minutes and 54 seconds, not driving the best at all, and I still got 138,000 points, so I really would recommend trying out the Ram. But do not worry, guys, it's also going to be a US Speed Tour event, and surprisingly, the Corvette C3 Fire ED is going to be way better than I actually thought it was. Like, this car is insanely fun to use. It's also going to be insanely quick. Now, do keep in mind, though, a lot of the touring cars tend to have a very similar top speed, so the Corvette only does around like 255, but luckily on this event, though, it does handle great. But even though this car might not be like the fastest touring car in the Crew 2, like I was actually really surprised with how well this car does handle, and it really does show that especially in this race, so I do feel like a lot of players definitely might be kind of surprised with it. But overall though, guys, I do think a lot of people are going to like the United States East Speed Tour Summit. This one's going to have a nice mix of events in this one, so I really do think a lot of players will like this, and luckily there's not going to be any insanely annoying events. Of course, guys, I would recommend using an Alpha GP car on this Escape though. I really do think it would most likely be easier than like a drag car, especially with that AI. And if you guys have any questions at all, let me know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more insight.
you